Hey everyone, welcome again to The Way It Is. And you know who I am, Luca Anafato, Team Luca First at Remax Service First Realty. And my guest today is our resident now, pretty much, because you've been on the podcast probably, I think, the most out of anybody. I'd have to go back and count. You're certainly rivaling Gerald Evans back during the pandemic. But I want to welcome back John Lusink, who... I'll say this not self-deprecatingly, but other than me, knows just as much about real estate, if not more. Then so we're always glad to have him here. And John, it's a god awful fucking February day. We're waiting for a storm. I'm fighting a cold. Why the fuck do we live in this country anyway? Just out of curiosity.
You know what? At our stage, we should be looking to move. I hear Costa Rica has some great deals on real estate.
Apparently they are. Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, I want to start first. We're going to get into some of what's going on in your world vis-a-vis the Real Estate Council of Ontario. But first, because we always like the updates from the GTA, and you've certainly got your finger on the pulse there with all your franchises. What are you seeing happening in your market area right now with now that there's sort of that perceived moratorium on rate increases?
Yeah, that's a very timely topic, Luca. We have been hearing anecdotally from lots of our agents, both in the GTA and outside, that they're sensing and seeing an increase, an uptick in transactions. When we look at the hard numbers, we are ahead of January by probably 30%. Now that may sound significant, but you know I'm not quite sure yet if it's meaningful. And the reason I say that is we're still down probably 15% over last year. And last year
Mm-hmm.
was already not great, although January, February of last year was still pretty strong. It was sort of, by March, April when things started to really tank.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell whether this is significant or not. I will say the drop in fixed mortgage rates probably has helped, and I think the fact that people are expecting still another increase or two, I think they're getting off the fence and saying, you know what, time to buy, because we are seeing lots of multiple offers, and that's also because there's a lack of supply. So it's a complicated market, actually.
Yeah, no, you've touched on everything that's happening here, at least that what I'm seeing,
Hmm.
and I think one of the things that has, because we're seeing that now, we're seeing
Yeah.
again not across the board, but there are certain properties that are getting multiple offers. They're selling for over the asking price. Some actually shockingly higher than expected, and others sort of
Right.
just nominally or marginally. No one's well. There have been a couple of examples of actually officially
Hmm.
holding offers, but more so, it's the strategy is the 24-hour or the 48-hour irrevocable
Yes.
to allow the the viewings
Yeah.
to happen and the offers to come in.
Right.
But we're seeing that, and I think that had, for me, at least in my opinion, I thought that stemmed at least that, like you just said, those buyers that were sitting on the fence that were qualified, had the means, are committing now because there's some confidence there, at least, in terms of rate increases and everything. Now,
Yeah.
you're right. Whether they, and, locking in at 4.89, which I think the last time I checked a rate sheet was the fixed 5-year money.
Yep.
Again, we've done this for way too long, John. That's still a really good interest rate. I think historically speaking, I think that's a really
Yeah.
good interest rate, right?
It
So,
beats the 11% I remember paying. So
that's right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that spurred it on. And but you're absolutely right. I think what's still the underlying issues and exacerbating a lot of our problems is the lack of inventory, right?
Yeah,
So,
lack of inventory. And I will say the other area of the market that we've gotten very um, tied into, only because we are now actively in it, and that is the pre-con condo market. And that is one that we're actually, I would say, worried about. And the reason being is that I think a lot of the people that bought in the last 2, 3 years who will be coming up to actually close, um, are struggling to get qualified now. And
Mm,
so that
wow.
market is potentially going to be a real problem for the development community. Um,
Yeah.
because as you all know, lots of these projects were sold out in hours. Um, Apparently, there's no international money coming in, but
Hmm.
strange how lots of international buyers were buying units sight unseen. And I'm not sure why FinTrack focuses on us and is not looking at them, but that's a whole
Right.
other podcast.
Yeah.
I That said, I think it's one that I know quietly behind the scenes. A number of developers have voiced real concern because they're putting these towers up, and people are not going to qualify because they were pre-qualified at 1-2%.
Right. Yeah.
So
Because I
it's
mean,
a problem.
what's the rate? The rate back then for a stress test was probably 3%, and now it's what, almost 9 or something, isn't it? I think, or something.
Exactly, and it's and I think, and look, to be fair, I think a number of buyers are agents who got in on the hype, fear of
Mm,
missing out. The whole FOMO thing, which I think
yeah.
there was a lot of that going on too, and so we're seeing a whole other sub market. I'll call it a black market of assignment deals
Right.
because, as you
Right.
know, developers don't really allow
No.
these transactions to be advertised. Certainly, they can't go on MLS, and but yet there's a whole market underlying this community where people are trying to unload at the prices they paid. I kind of think they're going to have to unload at
Right.
even below. So that's a problem, I think, waiting to happen.
And what kind of deposit monies are on the table? Do you think not much or
Usually around 10% of the price. So I mean, there were they're different. I mean, today I just saw a deal come across that you could put down 7.5%. So there's now incentives. There's
right?
rental guarantees. There's all kinds of other things coming up now. So
Yeah. No. Well, it's incredible, eh? These unintended consequences from just those changes, right?
yep, yep.
Which again begs the question: did the Bank of Canada really think it through or know what they were doing, right? So,
Well, I think, look, the policymakers, I said this a couple of years ago, I think really missed the boat, and I think they've done it again.
mm-hmm.
And but the factor here that's played a role that nobody counted on and really knows yet what how to factor it in is the COVID factor and what that's done to the market.
Right.
We weren't supposed to be busy, and nobody was supposed to be able to trade real estate during COVID. We had our best years ever.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
strange. So,
It, it, it is. Now, I'm going to say this very selfishly and probably quite provocatively, but um, I'm hoping the one side effect is that the number of registrants is going to drop. And I know for you as a broker, principal broker, owner right at home, that could be a concern. But are you seeing, what are you seeing right now in terms of attrition or?
you know what? It's a question that came up actually in one of our own company town hall meetings. So, first thing I should say is that I head up a company called Real Service, and that's Real SERVUS Holding Corp. Real Service owns Right at Home and owns property and condos.ca amongst other companies. Interestingly, at Right at Home, we probably saw about 400 people leave the industry from that
Wow.
company starting in December, and it's continued in January. But I think those that were going to leave because they signed up in the last 2-3 years thinking, hey, I can do the reno and flip, or
Yeah.
my brother's buying, or my parents are selling, or I'm buying. There were lots of people that said, I'm doing it just to see what it's like and save the fees.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that happened here in the GTA is that the Toronto Real Estate Board changed the date on when it charges its fees. It used to be in the June. Now they do it at year end. So you can imagine at year end, there's
Right.
all these fees that come due, and suddenly someone says, you know what, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And so we did see people retiring, but people also actually just flat out leaving the business. So is it a bad thing? I don't think so. I think a lot of people in the last 15 years got in the business because they saw, the market just going strong every year. And hey, how hard can it be, right?
Well, it's exactly right. And I
Oh,
had that comment with Tim Hudak last week, and
yep.
because I questioned him on Oria and the education piece for Maria, and we'll get into Eureka bit in a second. But
Mm,
I was at a function last night. I won't name the venue, and I certainly won't name the parties, but one of our servers was one of their agents, and
right.
and so there's a lot of these. I'll call them kids because they are kids.
Yep.
Got their licenses over the last 2 years.
Yep.
Got a taste for easy money, I guess is the best way to put it, and and signed leases with, you know, cars with nice badges on them and stuff, and now they're scratching their heads, going,
Yeah.
this is actually I got to work now, or I got to figure out how's this goes now,
Yep.
right? So,
Yep.
which and I that's always been a bone of contention for as long as we've done it, is these people that
Yeah.
get into it for all the wrong reasons and part time, right? I mean, just they're not professional at what they do, in my opinion. But so
Yeah. Uh, this is where I think so much has changed, and not just in real estate. I mean, I don't know that the commitment to be a professional anything, is necessarily there. Because it's the age of, you can do kind of everything online and bits of this and bits of that. And I mean, I can't tell you how many, I'm sure you get them, how many emails, spams come through saying, hey, for 20 minutes a day on YouTube, you can earn $35,000 a month. I
right,
don't know.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, I do take issue with, a number of the associations and, what they have allowed to happen, unfortunately. But it's also on us to get involved and figure out how to hopefully try and address it. So
yeah. Well, and that's the perfect segue. So you're running as a director for the Real Estate Council of Ontario board in
yeah,
region one, was it? Sorry.
Region One. As you know, I've been a director on the TREB board for about 6 years, and AREA for 1 year as the commercial director. The reason, quite honestly, because you know after 36 years in this business, I'm not sure um, if I was thinking straight, but quite frankly, um, two things two things actually got me, let's say, excited. That might not be the right word, but excited about doing this. And one was that Auditor General report that nobody's talking about anymore, that came out in November, and
Yeah.
and basically gave failing grade to Rico. And that's Rico and the board of Rico, and essentially, guys, you're not doing it right. But the second part, and I'm still scratching my head, is the reduction in fees that Rico came out with, which I don't know if you recall seeing. They
Vague.
dramatically have reduced their registration fees,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
right? So I've always felt that if you want to make this a profession, think about lawyers. I mean, I think their E&O costs are in upwards of $10,000. You know, one of the reasons people can get into our industry part time, it's so inexpensive,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yep.
where else can you get into a business for $5,000 essentially, and earn 500,000?
Exactly. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's great, but so understanding the rationale behind that is something I'd love to explore. And there's a number of things that I know over the years. I'm sure you brought this up in your podcast. I've asked about it, and it's hard to get answers. But the multiple offer issue, for example, lack of
Right.
transparency hasn't really been addressed.
Yeah.
Um, people getting their license who have criminal backgrounds. Now, look, I think you everybody gets a second chance, but there isn't a guideline and a consistent process.
Right.
Some do,
Right.
some don't, and some
Yeah.
are. So it's things like that that the auditor general. I mean, she pointed out at least 24 that were really issues.
Well, and I'm if you don't mind, I'll just step in because some of them I
Yeah,
had my Rob print off some of them, and my eyes just went wide. Like there was
yeah,
found between 2017 and 21, 78% of the fines issued by RICO were less than $10,000 or less, and that
hmm
they said didn't really prevent any the unethical behavior because
no,
some guy's commission was 82 grand and he was only fined $5,000. So
exactly.
and then he can write it off on his
Yeah,
income tax.
yeah,
So
exactly.
the worst
Yep,
one, though, the one that really caught my eye and speaks to all of this piece about education and realtors getting into it
yep,
and who gets their license 356 cases of large scale, deliberate, and organized misconduct
yes,
at Humber. Like, that's just
yeah, yeah.
craziness.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I guess maybe this is part and parcel of our legal system, but they get to appeal, they get to drag it on, and then there's a negotiation, and quite frankly, I don't know. I think this should bring into question, the whole switching to this out of country company that built the whole system,
Yeah,
the new educational system, but
yeah,
again, I guess part of my thing too is, well, where was the board? How effective is the board? Maybe they don't have a lot of power to,
yeah.
be able to call into question what's happening. So those two things, I just thought, what, I'll see. Obviously, it's an election. We'll see what happens.
Now, I brought it up with Tim, and I wouldn't mind just getting some of your insights on
Mm,
it because I've heard some grumblings with this TRESA, the Trust in Real Estate Services Act, which the
yeah.
second part of it is scheduled to drop April 1st. I've heard that might not even be a deadline that's going to get met, given some of the pushback that's happening. Or what are you hearing on that? If you can
I,
comment.
I I mean, first of all, that would never be a surprise. I mean, I think we're still calling Reba 2002. So that kind of should tell you everything you need to know. Um, so and there's a lot of discussion and debate around it, and I, full disclosure, I did participate initially in the group that Tim brought together to discuss it, but it's unfortunately, I think when you bring in what I will call the old guard to debate and discuss, changes, um, you know, people don't like change and they like to keep it the same, and
Yeah,
that's not always a healthy thing. So I don't know how productive that was, but there's some things that really need to be addressed, such as the multiple offer situation, and
yeah,
a lot more transparency with how we conduct our business.
yeah.
So
Well, and it's on the tip of my tongue, and I keep going back and forth in my brain whether I should say this out loud or not because I mean, there's always been bad actors in real estate. We all know
yep,
that, right? I mean, we can all go
yeah,
back and I mean, you get that everywhere. There's good and bad
sure,
lawyers, good and bad doctors, good and bad dentists. You go through everything.
true.
There's always those that just don't get it
Hmm.
and just don't operate the same way everybody else does. But
Yeah.
I have to say, and I don't have the stats in front of me. This is just pure conjecture on my
Hmm.
part, but based on a gut feeling, I think, and what I see happening in the industry and what we just discussed, the number of cases that are happening now in front of RICO and everything else has to have gone up during the last 2 or 3 years, right? With the influx of registrants, and I dare say See, and this is the word. And if I say this, you know what the hell? I'm going to say it. If somebody wants to call me on it, they can call me on it. But I think there's a certain socioeconomic or ethnic component to it, ethnicity to it, in terms of the players and those that are getting licensed and stuff. And again, I'm not trying to be disparaging to anybody whatsoever, but there just seems to be an underlying theme there. That's all.
Well, this also goes to education. I mean, I think we have to, really ensure that the education is understood, is thorough. And I just prior to this was on another podcast and discussing with that gentleman that, for example, we have for our 5,900 agents, we've got a mentorship program. Brand new agents coming in are assigned a mentor. Like you've got to do your work with that mentor. You have to take also all our training, or you get charged extra.
Right.
These are the things that we're trying to do. Is it perfect? No. But this is what we're trying to do to ensure that they're compliant. Because I could tell you, I'm spending more money on building a compliance department. And every brokerage is going to at some point be thinking about hiring a paralegal. Right? Yeah. It's so to try and limit that kind of risk and exposure, it's about training and making sure people are at least doing things the right way. So
well, I appreciate that, and you're right, and that and yeah, you're absolutely right. The education piece is huge. The financial commitment to get into the industry has to be much more significant. It has to make people give a second thought to even when you do your update courses, when you renew your license, when you get in the first time. If it's going to cost you $20,000 to get your license, I think a few people wouldn't have gotten in over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think if you were hit with a fine because of, negligent or some other form of misrepresentation or some other issue, your E&O insurance should quadruple.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't keep making $82,000 commission if you had to pay $5,000. I mean, you should be paying $10,000 in E&O.
Yeah.
So exactly. I think, and again, these are things that I don't know if it's possible to change them, but I would love to see some move to try and do some of that. Because look, in 21, Rico's operating revenues were $33.5 million. What are we doing?
Yeah, exactly.
78,000 salespeople, 20,000 brokers, 3,800 brokerages. There's a lot of fees flowing through that organization.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I know your podcast, or you're zoomed out because you said this was your fourth one. So I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
We'll end it on any kind of what you see on the horizon. Any.
Yeah, I think Man United's going to win the Premier League. First of all,
well,
they have a Dutch coach.
But they've got who's that crazy striker that's scoring all the goals? Isn't that for Man? Oh, are you saying Man United or Man City?
I said Man United. I didn't say Man City.
No. I'll take action on Man City. On Man City.
All right. Yeah. No, look, the prediction, all kidding aside, I think it's, this is a year of staying the course. It's going to be pretty flat production-wise, unless something changes on the supply side. That the proof will be in what happens in the spring market, right? Remains to be seen. And if there is a spring market, if there's a spring market, I'd be feeling a little more optimistic. If inflation picks up again, we're going to see a couple more hikes. So we'll see. So that's, it's not the most positive, but I think that's where we're going.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, John. I always appreciate your insights and your candor, and stay safe in the storm. Hope you get home safely.
Likewise.
All right. We'll catch you on the next one then, John. Thanks.
All right.